Hello everybody and welcome to this webinar from Curo Compensation. I'm Ruth Thomas. I'm the industry principal here at Curo and also a founder of the company, and I'm going to be taking you through this webinar today. As some of you know, we run regular webinars, normally 30-minute webinars covering best practice and also sometimes sessions focusing on how our compensation management solution can support you in the reward challenges that you face today. But today's session is a best practice webinar, so we're not really focusing on the Curo solution, and the topic that I'm going to cover is reward governance. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, I'm going to start with some housekeeping and brief introductions, and then on to the content for today, when I'm going to be looking at briefly the evolution of reward governance, and then what I think we're going to see potentially in the future, which is a broader application of reward governance, which really starts to focus on measuring the effectiveness of reward management. And then I'm going to finish with how technology can support you with that. The session runs for 30 minutes. I'll probably be talking for about 20-odd minutes of that, and I will allow time for questions at the end. From a housekeeping perspective, you are all currently on mute, and so we will keep those questions to the end. I'll let you know when we get to that point. In order to submit your question, you can use the chat box function, which should be in the Join Me panel at the top of your screen. If you don't want to ask your question during the session, that's fine. You can contact me via email afterwards, and the contact details are at the end. And you can also request to have a copy of the link to the recording session and also a PDF version of the PowerPoint. So just a quick introduction to Curo, for those of you who know who we are and what we do. So we're a HR technology provider, and we provide compensation management technology aimed to help our clients automate, streamline, and enhance their compensation management processes. We're a best-of-breed provider, so our solution only focuses on compensation management in the overall talent suite. And because of that, we're able to easily integrate with many different HR platforms, and we do work with many different HRIS and talent management providers with our client base. We've got over 50 clients on our platform, and we manage across over 130 currencies and 140 locations. We have a growing list of partners who we work with for implementation processes and also in order to extend our sales reach globally. And whilst many of our initial clients were in the legal and financial sectors, our reach has now extended across wide industry coverage, and our solution is totally agnostic in terms of industry sectors. And you can see here our strong and growing client base, some examples of the clients that we work with. And if you'd like to find out any more about Curo, our solution, case studies on our clients, then please do get in touch with us after this session. We'll be happy to share that information with you. But I'm going to focus now really on the webinar for today, which is all about reward governance. So over the last 8 years, we've seen a succession of developments in regulation and governance of remuneration, with many employers, many of you I know, having to review your existing pay arrangements and make sure they fit with the new regulatory landscape. And the evolution of this reward governance, well, really the emergence has come post the financial crisis, as many of you I'm sure are aware, where there was this focus on the role reward structures were perceived to have played in causing the excessive risk-taking that led to the credit crunch or the banking crash. And since the financial crisis, those of you working in that sector will know that a raft of regulation has been and continues to be deployed. So much so that we've seen some of the financial services firms a new discipline of reward governance emerging, particularly in global firms which are operating under multiple regulatory jurisdictions. But reward governance has now extended well beyond the FS sector, with the emphasis to date being on the management of executive pay and ensuring that executive pay is aligned with long-term business strategy and shareholder interest. And again, various legislation has and is continuing to emerge here. More recently, we're starting to see this push for governance over pay transparency with new and proposed legislation covering areas such as gender pay, pay equity across broad diversity sectors, and also pay transparency around executive pay gaps. And that's definitely the area we're going to see the most development on in terms of reporting and reward governance. But I also think beyond this, we're going to see a wider application in terms of reward governance across the whole spectrum of rewarding organisations and not just on these specific issues. So why do I say that? Well, the first hint for me comes in the UK with the amendments to the Corporate Governance Code 2014, which as those of you who have probably been involved in looking at that know that that's really come into effect for accounting periods beginning the 17th of June 2016. So although the main principles of this code were, in respect of remuneration, were focused on executive pay, there were hints in the code of the need to focus on the wider scene, and sort of in there stated that remuneration committees should be sensitive to wider pay and employment conditions beyond just executive pay, and particularly when considering issues such as executive pay gaps. So if you read the code, it does talk about remuneration committees needing to focus on the next level down of management, but also broader across all staff when looking at pay increases for all staff relative to pay increases for executives, looking at those executive pay gaps. So it's the first hint we've really seen in any of the regulation about looking broader across the whole spectrum of our reward strategy in terms of governance. I think we can also look broadly now at a change in expectations from CEOs in organisations as well. They really understand now the impact reward can have on an organisation's effectiveness and particularly reputational risk, and the need to manage reward strategically and also, more significantly, align that with shareholder interests. So, this kind of governance over some areas has made them much more aware of their need to manage more effectively and more in line with shareholder interests. I also think, the economic climate, the drive for productivity, is forcing us to look at how we can optimise the investment in human capital across the organisation, and obviously that means looking at reward and how we're spending it. So I think we can see a shift of focus to broader reward governance, measuring the effectiveness of our reward strategy across the whole organisation. So some of you may be saying, well, that's nothing really new, is it? We obviously look at our reward strategy and how effective it is, and isn't that what we're all doing? And to some degree, I would agree with you. When you pick up any annual report, I think you'll see organisations can easily articulate their reward strategy and principles and how they will use those reward practices to drive and support business strategy. I think we're very good at articulating it, and most of those reports will have that boilerplate of reward strategy, the attract, retain and motivate mantra. But I think what we're not so good at measuring and demonstrating is the effectiveness of actually delivering on those reward principles that make up our reward strategy. There are other clues or other evidence I think that we can see also in terms of, we're not really monitoring the effectiveness of our delivering on our key reward principles. Generally, that I can see there's this continuing issue of pay differentiation, particularly in managing fixed pay. Now, that could be argued that's due to the constrained pay budgets and wage growth that we have. But I think organisations do need to definitely do more to address weak pay differentiation. And why does this show a lack of effectiveness in reward governance? Well, if you've got weak pay differentiation, then I think you're not focusing. It's a sign that you're not focusing your pay on key talent or your high-performing talent. And so therefore, you're not optimising that spend. And my webinar next week, which is on pay, productivity and performance, will address those 2 points in more detail. Some of you may have attended that webinar before. We're running that next week, I think on Wednesday next week. What's clear from talking to many organisations as we go about our business here at Curo, and we talk to them about their reward strategy and what they want to deliver in terms of their principles, many of them struggle to demonstrate a clear ROI on reward. They find it very hard at a practical level to be able to demonstrate that. That's often, flows through in being unable to demonstrate an ROI in terms of investing in a compensation management product. Really, reward functions, more than any other area of HR, we should really be able to come up with a nice hard numbers to demonstrate to the most interpersonally challenged CEO that our reward practice are making a positive difference. But I think, we often find that we are unable to answer some of the key questions that I'm showing on this slide here, particularly things around, specifically looking at how ROI is being delivered on different elements of reward. What are the sorts of messages we're wanting each element of our reward programs to carry, and how are those being perceived by employees? Are they being perceived positively? And ultimately, how do they fit with our corporate values? And I think we're not always able to easily demonstrate the answers to those questions. One of the studies that I'm referencing in this session is a study by Mullen for Hay Group, which was published in 2014, and I share all the references at the end of this session. They talk about a requirement for a shift in focus, the way that we in reward look at pay and how we manage it. So this shift in change is really from looking at pay as a cost, which must be minimised with a focus on budget management, to one where pay and reward is seen as an investment which must be optimised to ensure maximum productivity and leverage of human capital. And I think this is a much more compelling approach when set against today's economic challenges. The study that I just mentioned from the Hay Group, they also focused on a disconnect between where reward professionals spend their time when they were surveyed and what CEOs indicated in the survey they wanted us to be doing. So you can see at reward, we're spending a lot of our time benchmarking and focusing on reward design, but heavily focusing, especially recently, on managing compensation fairness, and a lot of time controlling compensation and benefit costs. Whereas, in theory, what CEOs want from us is the ability to optimize productivity and cost effectiveness, engaging employees, and very much about aligning human capital and reward with their business strategies and looking at the ROI of those pay programs and structures. So the area we need to improve on is demonstrating to executives and shareholders and employees how we're monitoring the effectiveness of reward. And there is a body of research that has been dedicated to this issue, and I already mentioned one of those references. The next reference I'm going to mention is a survey and a document from Brown and Riley back from 2009 for the Institute of Employment Studies here in the UK. So this survey was very much focused on measuring effectiveness on pay and reward practices, what were we doing across different sectors, and how were we doing in terms of achieving a more evidence-based reward management approach. So this study, what it did was it looked at the UK CIPD annual reward management survey between 2004 and 2009. And in this, they identified the results from this. A growing minority of organisations are attempting to assess systematically the effectiveness of their reward practices. But the surveys also showed some of the following issues. So only 46% of the respondents in these surveys were unaware of the total spend on their rewards. Less than a quarter of organisations used any business data in making their assessments of how effective their reward strategy was. Fewer than a fifth of organisations conducted any form of financial cost-benefit analysis when they were implementing reward changes, and only 32% assessed the impact of reward changes on the staff receiving them. So they observed that while there were some companies were using information from staff surveys, some were comparing benchmarking data with other companies and drawing on an increasing range of different human capital data available internally within the organisation, things like recruitment questionnaires and exit interviews, there were a great number who were not. So there seems to be, from this survey demonstrating a general lack of effectiveness of really providing evidence-based data to show how effective our reward strategies were. So why is this happening? Well, a few of the surveys, I read a few surveys in this area, and these seem to be the main reasons that were coming up. So time and resources, that we don't have enough time in reward to address these issues. I think we need to make time. Something we might be less willing to admit to is a lack of expertise or methodology, not really knowing how to measure, what data to collect. Definitely one aspect hampering us is poor data management in HR. And I think most of us working with HR data know that it is an area of significant improvement required in organisations. And we are starting to see, with a move to HR cloud technology, much more commitment from organisations to move towards improving HR data. But I know from talking to our clients and prospects, data management and data quality is a significant issue for us. And often, it's only when we're actually doing the annual compensation review, organisations feel very confident that their HR data and their compensation data is actually accurate. And there's also this discussion of really the lack of senior management understanding and empowerment. So one, senior management not really understanding how we want to improve rewards, but also sometimes CEOs and the executive board not willing to empower us in order to look strategically, sort of us being contained in a box and not being given that exposure to remuneration committees. So what do we need to do? Well, I'm referring back to the Hay Group study from 2014, the Assessing Reward Effectiveness study. These are the reasons that they put forward in terms of what we need to do as a function. So we need to obviously demonstrate how reward programs support our management strategy, but we need to do that in a more evidence-based way and to show how improvements are actually being linked to changes in business performance. And when we come up with those measures, we need to do that in an ongoing way. So with ongoing assessment, each time we implement a new reward program, we need to assess the effectiveness of it and whether it's been successfully implemented and achieved the goals that we set out to achieve. Definitely moving from this gut feel approach to one that is more around evidence-based decisions and having the data to support that, and being able to involve managers and employees in this process. So we need to get feedback from managers and employees. That's definitely a key source of data in terms of looking at the effectiveness of our reward strategies. So I think establishing metrics is what I'm trying to say here. Establishing metrics for me seems to be a key area. So for each of your reward strategy principles that you have within your reward strategy, is trying to identify what metrics or key performance indicators will help you to demonstrate that you are succeeding there. And the IES study that I've mentioned, the Brown and Riley study from 2009, they provide an example of this in a case study from a major accounting firm. So this table identifies on the left the key reward principle from their reward strategy, and then on the right, the measures or the KPIs for this particular year that they've chosen to evidence success against the reward principle. And you can see, for each of these reward principles, the KPIs are broad ranging. Some of them are metric based in terms of looking at benchmarking data. Some of them are looking at, internal distribution, for example, PDR rating distribution by grade and function. But some of them are also looking at survey feedback. So you can see they're looking at employee surveys, management survey feedback, and also other human capital measures like turnover or exit interview outcome information. So it's a good example for me, I think, of, how, when I'm trying to identify KPIs, how can I go about that? What will be relevant for me to demonstrate whether we are delivering on our key reward principles? The other study that I've been referring to, the Hay Group study, they also have a model of a holistic and balanced approach to developing metrics and KPIs to demonstrate reward and fairness. So you can see that they balance both quantitative and perceptual KPIs and external and internal KPIs, and they're very broad ranging. But it gives you an idea here of the areas where you could look to in terms of coming up with some of those measures to develop to evidence success. So just to recap then, what I wanted to talk about on reward governance in this session was very much about broadening the focus of reward governance from, regulation in the FS sector and focus on executive pay, to starting to think about how we would monitor governance and success on delivering our reward strategy across all employee groups. And moving from that gut feel to more of an evidence-based approach, so that we can really show over time, more easily, how we are demonstrating success, and the need to use multiple sources of data and evidence in order to do that. And I guess the important point there is, to continue to monitor over time, and you will need to obviously adapt those measures as necessary. So how can technology help you here? Well, I think as soon as you start talking about data and analysis, then technology really does have a place to play. Obviously, technology can help you to calibrate and collate all the data you need into one place to support evidence-based decisions. That's very much about what we do here at Curo. It's giving you a platform to really collate the benchmarking data, collate your employee data, collate your award distribution data, and be able to study that using BI and analytical tools. Now, traditionally, compensation management technology and HR technology has been focused very much on automating and streamlining processes. But most leading platforms now are integrating new BI and analytical tools in order to support evidence-based decision-making. And we're doing that here at Curo too. We've integrated a leading BI platform into our product, and we're calling that platform ITCM, so Intelligent Total Compensation Management. And what we're aiming to do with our platform here at Curo is to help you to leverage leading analytical tools in order to track that progress against your strategic reward goals. We are helping our clients by creating visually persuasive dashboards to empower decision makers. We're able to provide much more powerful benchmarking information and to allow you to calibrate key talent metrics. So we're not just focusing on performance rating, we're focusing on many talent metrics to allow you to analyze your reward allocation to make sure it's fair and transparent, and whether it's delivering on your reward goals. Are the right people getting the compensation that you wanted to give at the start of the process? I'm just going to give you a quick example of some of the dashboards that we're providing to our clients. So for our clients, they can select a number of dashboards. Each dashboard is essentially a story that allows them to focus. So you could imagine this being a story around a key reward principle. This could be something you share with your managers or with your executives. We have some quite advanced benchmarking dashboards focusing both internal and external equity. We're doing a lot of work with our clients on diversity and looking at compensation distribution relative to multiple diversity metrics. And we're focusing heavily on gender pay gap and looking at that, particularly for our clients in the UK who are having to deal with the regulatory reporting. So if you want to find out any more information about ITCM and what we're doing at Curo, then please do get in touch. And more broadly, in terms of reward governance, as you think about managing compensation reviews, technology can obviously support you here as well. So what we're able to help our clients do is impact decision makers real time. There's this big conundrum about making pay decisions more objective and less subjective. And it's questionable whether we'll ever wholly achieve that, because it's people making decisions about other people. But the main objective of providing evidence-based data to decision makers is that they're able to hopefully reduce that subjectivity and make their decisions more objective and make them more informed. We're using system alerts within the system as managers make recommendations to make sure not only that they're complying to various thresholds and your program rules and guidelines, but we're also increasingly using our alert functionality to draw managers' attention to things like gender pay gap as they're making compensation decisions and other fairness issues. Obviously, we help to manage and control budget spend and help managers make allocations within various thresholds for pay ranges and market positioning. I mentioned earlier, we're very much heavily focusing on pay for talent rather than just pay for performance. So we're helping to support distribution relative to key talent metrics. So some of our clients, the more progressive clients, are looking at performance rating, they're looking at attrition risk, and they're looking at future skill value of their employees to get a total picture of the value of an employee to the organisation, and taking that into account when they're awarding pay and bonus to employees. And obviously, with a system, you get governance over the whole approval process and a clear audit trail over any decisions that have been made within the solution. So just an example of how technology can support you more broadly in terms of governing your reward processes. So you can see here the surveys that I've referenced, the studies that I've referenced during this session. So I've included all the links there if you want to go and do some more reading on that. And as I said, for those of you who joined slightly later in the call, you can email in and request a copy of this deck and also a copy of the recording so that you can replay this at your own convenience. So just a reminder that you're all on mute, but I'm going to move to a time now where you can submit questions if you wish. So you can use the chat button functionality to submit any questions. I've had some submitted already, but if you don't want to ask a question now, again, please feel free to email in after, and I will respond to anybody that emails in. So I've had one question that came in, which is saying, is there any immediate legislation we should be aware of that is requiring us to address a more broader approach to reward governance? So no, as I said, I think the only indication I've seen in the UK is in the corporate governance code that I've referenced, but I do think it was something that we will be expecting a great demand from shareholders and remuneration committees in terms of delivering on reward strategy. And another question I had is, how are people doing employee and manager feedback? Is that part of the annual engagement survey? So yeah, I think many of our clients, they do include questions about the compensation review as part of, and the effectiveness of the reward strategy as part of their annual engagement survey. But I know some organisations are also doing that immediately post their compensation reviews when it's fresh in their minds. And it's something that we're looking to support in the future here at Curo, at the communication phase, when managers are able to distribute compensation communications to employees and employees are able to access those, that they will be able to give feedback at that stage on any of the key questions you have about how effective the reward strategy and the compensation review allocation has been. Any other questions from the audience here? No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you all very much for joining the session today. If you want to get in touch, you can get in touch with us at info@curocomp.com. You can go to our website and also reach out to us there through curocomp.com. And as I said, please get in touch. Any questions, copies of the deck, copies of the presentation, and further details about our webinar series that we're running over this summer. Thanks very much, all of you, for joining today. It's been great to share this information with you, and I hope to speak to you soon. Thank you.